2021, my wife and I bought our first home in Colorado. With both of us being big savers and with me preferring a more minimalist lifestyle, how could we start our journey of home ownership and real estate investing without going broke while trying to buy and maintain a home? This is the story of how we started house hacking. House hacking is renting out some of your own space to offset the costs of home ownership. In the 3 years that we've owned this home, on average, we've paid less than half of the average cost of renting in America, and some months even gotten paid to live here, all while building our own net worth and equity in the house. I'm going to break down the exact numbers that made this work for us and the reasons that we started it in the first place, including how we used the extra money that we had saved to be able to buy our second investment property before I turned 30. How's it going, everyone? If this is your first time here, my name is Christian. I'm a US Navy veteran, a college dropout, and a former systems engineer who was able to retire early before I turned 30. On this channel, I break down some of the hard lessons that I learned in the military, as well as discuss what worked and what didn't for my wife and I on our journey to financial independence. So first, let's get into the basics of house hacking. So there are a few different ways that you can house hack, and a few characteristics that my wife and I look for in a potential home to be able to set ourselves up to be able to do it. Just as an aside, my wife and I are actually in the process of moving into that second investment property to house hack there as well. So because we're in the middle of packing everything and trying to get moved, there's not going to be any fancy editing or anything like that on this video. I'm just going to try to give you clear and concise information so we can get through this and I can go back to packing. To anyone who's actually interested in house hacking, I recommend looking into single family homes, specifically ones that look like they can be divided by throwing up some sort of interior partition wall, or maybe just adding an extra door somewhere inside so you can create the illusion of two separate units. Yes, you can definitely look into buying multifamily properties, but depending on the area of the country that you're investing in, there might be a lot of other investors that are also looking for multifamilies in that area who may be more familiar with your local market, or maybe they just have more money to throw at rental properties than you do. And if that's the case, then they're able to much more easily price you out. But if you find a good deal where the math works, I'm all for it. Just keep in mind, we're going to be talking about residential real estate, which means anything with 4 units or less. But with a single family home, you can still divide up some of the space internally, or if you're up for it, you can just rent out some room inside your house as long as you're okay with having some sort of shared space. So the house that we house hack with is actually set up with a 2-bedroom, 1-bath upstairs, and downstairs in the basement unit, it's 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, but it's not fully underground, so all of the bedrooms still have windows open. The house also already had a backdoor entrance that led straight down the stairs into the basement, so we could create the appearance of 2 separate units by just throwing a door in our kitchen. And we added locks on both sides of the door, that way both us and our tenants could have their own privacy and safety. Because the basement is 3 beds and 1 bath, after doing some upgrades down here, we were able to set it up so that it could be rented out to any length of tenant. We've rented to short-term tenants on Airbnb, we've rented to mid-term tenants between 1 and 3 months, and then we've also rented down here to long-term tenants, which is about anything over that length. Let's quickly discuss some of the pros and cons for the different lengths of tenant stays. For us, we wanted a property that we would have space that could be rented to any length of tenant. That's why we had to look for one that was set up the way our house is, with a quote-unquote separate unit downstairs. That way we wouldn't have to have shared space all the time, especially with people we didn't know. First, short-term tenants. If you've ever used Airbnb before, this would have been you. Short-term tenants stay for a couple of nights, up to about a month at most. The best part about short-term tenants is, in our opinion, it was the easiest way to make the most amount of money. In our area, we were able to charge a little bit less than $200 a night. So if we rented for the entire month, then it's about $6,000, after you take out Airbnb's fees and taxes. Keep in mind though, that for short-term and for mid-term tenants, you're going to be paying to furnish the unit yourself. So you're going to have much more upfront costs. The other downside to short-term rentals is it was the most active management that we've had to do. What I mean by active management is that we were constantly messaging back and forth between people who were trying to reserve a booking here, and then we also had to deal with all of the turnover maintenance, like cleaning up after people and then washing all the linens, and you just have to decide for yourself if that extra money is worth the extra headache. After a few months of renting on Airbnb, we moved on to renting to more midterm tenants, which usually lasted between 1 and 3 months. Since we had already furnished the unit so we could rent on Airbnb, all we had to do was remove it from Airbnb and post the listing on a site called Furnish Finders, which is primarily for travel nurses. The great part about having a midterm tenant is because they were staying for much longer, they just treated the unit much better than a short-term person on Airbnb would. We also made less money with a midterm tenant, but in our opinion, it was worth it for the more hands-off approach to management that we got to have. Maybe we just got really lucky, but in our opinion, the only downside to having a midterm tenant was that our laundry is in the basement. So we had to find another way to go out and do our laundry, like laundromats or like wash and fold. Is that what that's called? Where they like come and take it, that thing. Whereas with Airbnb, we would just do all of our laundry down here in between guest stays. Honestly, this was just because the layout of our house though, and we didn't want to pay to add extra hookups somewhere upstairs so we could have our own laundry. One thing I forgot to mention before though is the basement unit didn't actually have a kitchen when we bought the house. That was something that we had to install with some minor remodeling to a wet bar area down here. That way when we rented it on Airbnb, we could rent it for much more per night because it had a full kitchen. It wasn't a requirement for Airbnb, plenty of places just have like a little coffee bar, and we could have had much less money invested up front down here if we hadn't added it. But it was the main reason that we were able to rent to midterm tenants, because if someone's staying for 1 to 3 months, it's kind of a requirement to have a kitchen. So after we stopped deciding to rent to midterm tenants, we moved on to long-term tenants. Fortunately for us, we had a couple of friends that were ready to get out of the city that they lived in and wanted to try out this area, and we decided on an agreement that would work out for everyone. The pros to this are that there was no more turnover maintenance until they fully had moved out. We also knew for a long period of time that our mortgage would be offset and we could just save that extra money towards future investments. The cons were that this was the least money we had made throughout this whole process, but for us, the peace of mind and less active management was absolutely worth it. So now the part that I'm sure that everyone wants to see, the numbers. How much did the house cost? How much did the renovations cost? And how much did we make? I'm going to round some of the numbers just to make math simpler. For the sake of explaining how to do this, the purchase price of your home matters a little bit less than your monthly mortgage measured against the cash flow of the property. Your home's purchase price is going to vary a lot based on where in the country you live, what interest rates are like right now, and whether or not the house is move-in ready or if it needs some renovations. Our mortgage is about $2,000 a month. Other than purchasing the house, we also had to pay for renovations, furnishing, and a small application fee for our city for Airbnb. So as soon as we moved in, we quickly started trying to find furniture to furnish the downstairs area, as well as the conversion of the wet bar to a more full kitchen setup. The cost of a kitchen conversion, an oven, plus some other odds and ends, was $4,000, which by far was the most expensive part of getting everything ready for down here. When it comes to furnishing something like this, if you decide to do short-term or midterm, please don't buy all new furniture. We were able to furnish 3 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a living room down here, all for less than $1,000 by just using Facebook Marketplace and having a little bit of patience. You don't have to keep that furniture forever if you don't want to, but I would highly suggest getting cheaper furniture and getting the unit rented as fast as possible just to get the ball rolling, and then as you make more money, you can continue to replace furniture if you feel the need to. Most of the time we found some sort of beat up furniture that we could fix up ourselves. Then when we wanted to upgrade it, we were able to sell it for a profit because it had just been a free table that we were able to repaint or refinish, or it was a couch that someone's kid had drawn all over that we were able to deep clean and they just wanted to get it out of their house. So altogether, it took us about $5,000 to get the unit down here ready to rent. First, we listed it on Airbnb. We had the space listed for 90 days, of which 67 nights got rented. We were able to make about $12,000 after all of the Airbnb fees and taxes. That means that not only did those 3 months cover the renovation costs, but they also covered our whole mortgage for that duration and put $1,000 back in our pocket. At that point, since my wife and I were both still working full-time jobs, we decided to remove it from Airbnb and move on to midterm rentals. We could have definitely left it on Airbnb to make more money because by that time we had a lot of great reviews and we're in a really high demand area, but we kind of just valued our peace of mind more than the money it was bringing in. When we rented it on Furnish Finders, we were able to rent it for 3 months at a time for about $1,850 per month. That means that my wife and I were both paying $75 each to live in our own home, where we were building equity and saving extra money towards future investments. Shortly after we stopped doing midterm rentals is when we had our friends moved in that I talked about earlier, and we decided on $1,300 a month. While we made the least amount of money from this arrangement, it still worked out great for us because we had our own separate space since there was still the divider upstairs. And rent in this area is about like $1,550 per month, so it still worked out to be a deal for them too. Plus, now we can come downstairs and use our laundry room again. So in total, in the 3 years that we've owned this house, we've saved over $40,000 in our mortgage cost, which we have then used as the down payment for our next property. So to recap, first, keep in mind that the average rent in the US is about $1,700. For the months that we had it listed on Airbnb, we were able to make $1,000 to live in our own house. For the months that we had it rented on Furnish Finders, we paid $75 each. And for the months that we've had long-term tenants, we've each paid $350. All of this to save roughly $40,000 through house hacking. So if you would like to get started house hacking for yourself, these are the 3 things that I recommend that you do first. Number 1, get out of consumer debt. My wife and I have both been out of consumer debt for quite a few years now, and I can tell you that it makes it infinitely easier to be able to purchase or finance a home. Also, if no one ever rented the space, we were still comfortable with making the whole house payment because we didn't have a bunch of consumer debt to deal with on top of it. Number 2, learn the different kinds of financing options. If you're a first-time home buyer, you can always look into something like an FHA loan, We used my VA loan on this first property and we used a conventional loan on the second one. Every loan structure is going to have its own set of requirements. And just a quick tip, if you decide to use a conventional loan, if you have good credit, explore options like using less than 20% down. Yes, you will have to pay PMI or private mortgage insurance, but I promise you that if you have good credit, it will be so much less than the 15% down that you have to use instead. For example, on our second property, we put just 5% down instead of the standard 20%, but that saved us over $70,000 for the down payment, whereas our private mortgage insurance is only about $80 per month. And finally, number 3, understand that if you're investing in real estate, you're making a long-term plan. Unless you're doing some sort of home flips, then this is going to be an asset that you have for multiple years more than likely. Don't rush the process. Take some time to read a couple books or go dig through a site like Bigger Pockets where they have plenty of articles about this stuff. The more you can prepare yourself up front, the less likely you are to rush yourself into a decision where you end up getting burned. But anyways, that's it for this one. If you have any other questions about house hacking or home financing or just investments in general, leave me a question down in the comments below because I'd really like to know what kind of stuff people are interested in hearing more about or what kind of things you guys are really getting value from. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you in the next one.